Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to have a little nurse talk, a sit down talk about something that is actually kind of heavy hearted, and I wanted to talk about dealing with patient death. And during this video I kind of just want to tell you about my first experiences with patient death, my experiences since then, in some ways that I think help coping with patient death and dealing with your grief or your emotions over the situation. Chances are if you are a nurse or a healthcare worker in general, you have dealt with death at some time during your career, or you definitely will in the future. It's something that's completely unavoidable. It's something that's completely natural, and just as everybody's born, everybody will die someday. I'll die someday. You'll die someday. We just don't know when or the circumstances surrounding it. So it's kind of a scary thing. It's kind of a hard thing to deal with, and it can be a very sad thing to deal with. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. The first time I ever dealt with patient death, I was doing my clinicals in the ER, and I was a student at that time, and we had a patient pass away. It was also the first time I'd ever done CPR on somebody. Since then, I've dealt with a lot of deaths during my career, working ICU, working trauma. Really, no matter where you work, you're gonna deal with this. I worked in oncology as a patient care assistant or CNA, and I dealt with it a lot there too. So I feel like that I've just experienced a lot of death in my career, and some of them have been less traumatic than others, but every one of them have been impactful in some way. So I just wanted to share some tips for how I deal with that. Now, a little bit about me and my personality. I tend to have a delayed reaction to emotional situations. If something happens to me, something traumatic or something like death, I don't respond right away. It takes me a while to process and deal with it later, and my emotions don't tend to come up till later on. I honestly think the most stressful and emotionally taxing part of dealing with patient death is being there for their families. And this is something that's very important. I honestly feel like we don't get enough education or practice with this part, because we're there for treatment, and I know how to take care of patients. I know how to do ACLS. I know what to do to save them. But when we can't save them, what comes after that is dealing with the family while they say goodbye to their loved one, and we're there with them afterwards while they're grieving. And that's the hardest thing for me in my career. It was the hardest thing for me to get used to from the beginning. And I always thought the actual scenario of trying to save somebody or them passing away would be the hardest. And for me, it's actually the emotional part of dealing with the remaining family members who are just grieving and so upset. And I think a lot of that is because I'm a very empathetic person. I've always been that way. It's extreme to the point where I have trouble even getting upset at people or mad at people who do stuff wrong to me, because I can put myself in their shoes. Anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But if you're in healthcare, chances are you're probably a very empathetic person anyway. You entered this career field to help people, so you probably feel pretty similarly to me when it comes to feeling the pain of others or wanting to help others, wanting to stop others from feeling pain, and sometimes you just can't do that, and that's really hard. So my number one piece of advice is in dealing with the families, and that is it's okay to be silent. I always used to feel like that I needed to say something when a tragic situation was going on, and I was in the room with a family who was saying bye to their dead loved one, and I felt like I should be saying something or talking to them, trying to console them. But there's nothing you can really say to help them. There's nothing you can say to take their pain away. And sometimes just being there, handing out tissues, trying to hand out waters or anything you can to just make them a little more comfortable is all you can do. Sometimes people just need a hug. Not everybody's a hugger, but sometimes family members just want you to be there with them. Sometimes they need a hug, a shoulder to cry on, and you can be that person. So you don't always need to be saying something. Don't be scared of saying the wrong thing. Don't be worried that you're not saying enough. Honestly, there is no right answer here, and all you can do is what feels right. And oftentimes for me, I found that that's silence and waiting for them to start talking. And if they talk and initiate and want to have a conversation more about what's happening, I'm there and I'll talk to them as well. So the second piece of advice I have, and these are in no particular order, I'm not saying one of these is more important than the other, but the second thing I would say is please try not to blame yourself and try and find things wrong with what you did when somebody dies in your care. We've tried everything we can to save somebody. We've given blood, done ACLS, done CPR, done everything we can think of, tried to save this person, and they just couldn't make it. Their body couldn't handle it, and it was just time for them to go, even though it doesn't feel like it's time and it doesn't feel like it's right. And there's nothing that you could have done, not one thing specifically that you could have done or changed what you did or changed the timing is something usually that would have saved that person. There's too many factors going on. So try not to blame yourself. Try not to replay scenarios over and over again in your head, blaming yourself. Now, there's a healthy way to approach a scenario and see what you could have done better. And that's usually done in a group setting with everybody else who is involved in the situation and a manager or somebody like that. going over the code. This is an educational experience. Sitting at home and beating yourself up and thinking about the time that you gave epinephrine or the rate of your compressions or something like that is not going to help you. It's not going to help save the patient. It's just going to drive you crazy. So please try not to do that to yourself. I know a lot of newer nurses or younger nurses that are dealing with death for the first time tend to do that. I've had people tell me they do that. I've done that in the past before too, and just realize that that's not a productive way to deal with your feelings, and it's just gonna make you feel worse. And this kind of leads me into the third thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is don't compare your feelings to how other people are feeling during the situation. Everybody processes situations and feelings and emotions differently, and just because one nurse is extremely upset and one doesn't seem to be upset at all does not mean that either one of them is dealing with the situation in the wrong way. We all just handle things in our own unique ways. Obviously, you need to be able to keep it together during the situation. You can't really be functioning during the code or like a mass transfusion protocol or any kind of dire situation if you're completely overwhelmed and upset. And if that's happening during the situation, obviously that's another issue that needs to be addressed, but I'm talking about afterwards. Take things at your own pace. Deal with things how you feel like you need to deal with them. If you're upset and you need to go in the bathroom or the break room and cry for a second, do that and don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you're not upset and you feel like you can go right into your next patient's room and provide them with care and you feel like you need to keep going, keep yourself busy, do that as well. There's no right answer here. Everybody deals with it differently. So I just wanted to say that because often in healthcare, there's this kind of vibe that you shouldn't get upset about things. You should keep a wall up. You shouldn't get upset about patients or situations. You should kind of just move on to your next task. That's not always the case. The fourth thing I wanted to say that is something that has really helped me in the past and continues to help me is find an outlet for yourself, whether that be working out, whether that be crafting, whether that be continuing education, something that you can focus on and spend your time on that's for you. And this isn't just with patient death, but just with stress in general. Having something for you is very helpful, something productive that makes you feel good, that makes you feel like you're getting stuff done and you can put your mind and soul into and really focus on that. Now for me, this might sound a little weird, but something that's an outlet for me is working out. So if I'm feeling really upset about a patient, feeling really bad for them and their family, feeling really upset about a death or anything like that, I tend to kind of in my mind dedicate my workout to them. And this is just something weird that helps me, but I dedicate my workout to them that day or that whole week or whatever it may be. And I just feel like I just push really hard. I try to be grateful that I'm healthy and able to work out, that I'm able to be in that situation and I still have time left. I don't want to take it for granted while somebody else is over here wishing that they did have that time or that health to be able to pursue what they wanted. So I just try to push really hard in my workouts and in all parts of my life, school, work, workouts, whatever, and just be grateful and be cognizant of what's going on and that I'm lucky to have the health that I do. Just when it all comes down to it, it's all about health. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So it's just a little weird thing I do. Obviously, this isn't like a formal dedication. It's just in my mind and I just think about it. And when I feel like I can't run anymore or can't do something anymore, I think like, well, somebody else can't do this, so I should be glad I can and just keep pushing. Now, the last piece of advice I have, I think it would be tip number 5, is to talk with others, whether this be your coworkers who are there with you during the incident or whether this be a therapist or a counselor or somebody who can help you deal with your feelings. Obviously don't violate HIPAA if you're not talking to your coworkers who are there in the situation, but you can talk about situations without giving details. If you need to see a therapist or a counselor, do not feel bad about that. Sometimes you need somebody objective to talk to who's very neutral and can just give you advice and just be there for you to listen and that you don't feel like is judging you. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's a great way to deal with your feelings and to just get things off your chest, and it's very helpful. Talking to your coworkers can be great too if you have good coworkers, and just depending on the situation. And you know, if you come home and you just had a really bad day, you lost a patient, something horrible happened, don't be afraid to tell your family that you're just really not feeling good and you had a bad day at work. You don't need to go into detail or make it gruesome for them or tell them anything specific. And maybe you just need to go take a bath or listen to some music or read a book or go sit in your room by yourself for a little while. But oftentimes they'll be very understanding of this. I'm sure they know your job is stressful. Just don't be afraid to vocalize when you need a little you time. All right, so that's it for my tips for dealing with death. Obviously, there's many more things you can do, and that's just kind of some things that I found that are helpful. I hope they were helpful to you guys as well. If you have any tips or things that you do to help you cope with loss, please leave them in the comments below, because people who have dealt with stuff before can help new nurses, new healthcare workers who are just now dealing with it for the first time. And by sharing your feelings and experiences, you can really help lift them up and help them realize that they're not going through this alone. So please leave that below if you have anything to share. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful and informative. I'm sorry, I know it's a heavy-hearted topic, but it's something that I just needed to talk about. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more nurse talks or just follow along with me in general, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I hope you guys have an amazing week. And as always, I will see you next week.